Hello, this is Erica with Launching Legacies. Welcome to our daily devotional. Today we are continuing our extended devotional. We are going to be looking at applications from a loyal friend. We're looking at Jonathan. So Jonathan is very interesting. We don't look at him often on his own. Often we look at the relationship between Jonathan and David, and to some extent we will talk about that, but we're really going to look at Jonathan's character and apply his character in particular to we're going to try to find application from his character. So let's look at Jonathan. We're in 1 Samuel and we're at the 18th chapter. So I want to first let me say that Samuel is, the book of the story of Jonathan and David kind of spans for a little while. So we're going to look from 1 Samuel 18, but we're actually going to go down. I've compiled a list of scriptures, and so I want to give you the range because I'll kind of flip through them a little bit quickly. To 2 Samuel, the first chapter, 17th verse is the last verse that I've compiled, and so they're in chronological order. However, I'm going to skip through a little bit because it's quite a lengthy story, so I'll paraphrase and go through back and forth, but you at least know the range where you can find the story of Jonathan and David. So Jonathan is David's best friend, and actually from the relationship of Jonathan and David we get this concept of not just biblical, we get this concept of biblical soul ties. It says the scripture says that their souls were knit together. Okay. Now remember, they were friends. And so we see that friendship can be such a strong bond that it can knit one soul to another person's soul. And this friendship between Jonathan and David was definitely that way. So we're going to look at the circumstances though, because it was not an easy friendship, and they're required from Jonathan a level of loyalty to his friend that is I would say unusual, but definitely godly, and Jonathan has to grow in that. And so we're going to look at Jonathan as a character. So we look in 1 Samuel 18 and 1, we see that so for one, Jonathan and David are already friends when we get to this passage, but this is where Saul starts to become jealous of David, okay? And so it says, after David had finished talking with Saul, so he talked to Saul about something, he met Jonathan, the king's son, and there was an immediate bond between them, for Jonathan loved David, okay? So they had known each other, but they started to bond with each other, and then they really become immediate friends, okay? And so Jonathan and David made a solemn pact with each other because they loved each other. And so it says that Jonathan in verse 8, 1 Samuel 18 and 3 says that, and Jonathan made a solemn pact with David because he loved him as he loved himself. And so it's really beautiful. Jonathan loves David as a friend, but he loves him as much as he loves himself. And it's quite a powerful bond. And so what happens is this: he makes a pact with David. He gives David his robes. He gives him his, basically his clothing as an offering to say that, you are my friend and I will always be here for you. So part of that pact was to give him his stuff. Just part of the tradition at the time. And so he gives David his stuff to prove to him, that you're my friend and I love you. But now at the same time, Saul decides that he's going to want to kill David. And he really becomes very vicious in his attempts to kill David. I mean, it's kind of crazy. So Saul pursues David to try to kill him. And at first you see the interactions through most of 1 Samuel, like the 19th chapter. Saul is trying to kill David, but Jonathan's approach to it is kind of like he doesn't take it seriously. He's like, Dad, why would you want to kill him? Like, he hasn't done anything to you. Why are you trying to pursue him? And at some point, it seems that he convinces his brother, his father, to not pursue David. And so he's like, okay, fine. And so his father kind of concedes, and it says in 1 Samuel 19:6, so Saul listened to Jonathan and vowed, as surely as the Lord lives, David will not be killed. Okay, so it seems like somehow Jonathan has persuaded his father. Now, okay, I'm going to listen to you, Jonathan. You're right. Why am I trying to kill David? This is crazy. So I'm going to vow I'm not going to kill David. Now, this is interesting because there's two vows that we've just spoken of. One is the vow that Jonathan has made to David. And he said to David, I'm going to be your friend. I'm going to be with you. I'm going to be by your side. He's given him his clothing as an exchange to say, look, I'm telling you, this is my robe. I'm giving you my belt. I'm giving you these things to prove that I'm loyal to you. And now the second vow is Saul, is the king's vow. And the king is vowing as long as the Lord lives. So he vows on the Lord. He makes a promise on the Lord that he's not going to try to kill David. Well, spoiler alert, he is, okay? He's going to change his position, and he does change his position, and he does, after making that vow, does change his mind again and decides he wants to kill David again. And so he's attempting, not just trying, but he really attempts to kill David. Now, Saul gets kind of an inclination because Jonathan saves David's life, David's life after Saul changes his mind again, that he can't trust Jonathan. So he decides, I can't trust Jonathan, so I'm going to keep it secret from Jonathan. And David figures that out. He says, okay, you know what? Your dad, so here goes, 1 Samuel 20 and verse 3. Then David took an oath before Jonathan and said, your father knows perfectly well about our friendship, right? So he has said to himself, I won't tell Jonathan. Why should I hurt him? But I swear to you that I am only a step away from death. I swear it by the Lord and by your own soul. And so David is like, listen, I know you want to think good of your father, but at the end of the day, he's going to try to kill me again because he's determined that I need to die for what I've done. So, and what I've done is become more popular than Saul, right? So Saul knows that David will become king. And so it becomes this issue of jealousy that Saul has against David. And anyhow, so David is trying to tell Jonathan what's going on. And it took Jonathan a while, but finally he realizes, that Saul is intent to kill him. And so it's when Saul hurls a spear at Jonathan because he's angry that Jonathan has protected David. And that's in 1 Samuel 20 and verse 33. It says, then Saul hurled a spear at Jonathan, intending to kill him. So at last Jonathan realized, he's like, oh my goodness, that his father was really determined to kill David. Okay, so there was this weird exchange. And so he's finally determined to do that. So after that, Jonathan is really determined to protect David from his father Saul. He realizes his father is not well, and really he can't convince him to do the right thing. And so he protects David from harm. And in the meantime, David runs. He's, running away. Jonathan's giving him all these cues and these ways to be safe. And at the end of the story, both Saul and Jonathan die. Okay, they both die in battle. And so it's a prolonged story, but I encourage you to read it because it's very interesting. If you like drama, right, this is definitely an example of drama, but it's also this really great example of a good friend. And what happens here is interesting. So let's just talk about the nitty gritties of it. I've kind of read through the passages, and I'll encourage you to read more on your own. But here goes what happens. Jonathan is in line to inherit the kingdom. Okay, so let's be that straightforward with that. His father is the king. And so by lineage, he would be the next king. But he doesn't prefer the opportunity to be king over the vow of friendship that he's made to David. In other words, by saving David, because David is the anointed king of Israel, and Saul was the first anointed king, but his lineage would be the next king by birth. So legacy for Jonathan is kingship, but David has been anointed to be the king. And so Jonathan is doing a very interesting thing by preserving his friendship with David, right? He preserves his friendship with David at the cost of his kingdom. And it ends up being at the cost of his life because he's in battle with his father, and he ends up dying with his father. And so God wipes out both Saul and Jonathan, okay? And David has a part in burying them and making sure that they're, all the affairs are taken care of. But it's important for us to realize that what Jonathan does is such a beautiful example of character, because he doesn't prefer his own position in life over the vow of friendship that he's made to David. He doesn't prefer his own father over this vow of friendship that he's made to David. And so he has such great character, right? He has such a stand-up character. He knows that David hasn't done anything wrong to Saul. He knows the circumstances. It's not like this is all a mystery to him. He's watching it. He was intending and hoping that his father would change his mind and stop acting crazy, but his father decided he wasn't going to. And so at some point, Jonathan really has to really dig deep into the depth of his character, which is very much like the character of Christ. And he determines himself to do what is right, no matter what it cost him. It cost him the kingship. He doesn't become king. Okay. And as a matter of fact, he has a son that David rescues later on, but his lineage never, the people in this family, they never become king. They don't receive this authority and position. David is going to be king, and Jonathan knows that, and he knows what it's costing him. He knows what he's risking, but he determines to do the right thing despite what it cost him. And that's a really important thing. And we can get great applications from Jonathan's behavior, is that it's not more important for him to be exalted than it is for him to do the right thing. And sometimes we struggle with this, right? Because there's so many opportunities for us in a regular day for us to choose to do the right thing, or to glorify or edify ourselves in doing something that maybe isn't so right, or passively just let something go by and just not deal with it. But it's important that we take this story to heart and recognize that even at the cost of his kingship, and even at the cost of disappointing his father, Jonathan chooses to do the right thing. He becomes loyal to David. And so because of this, the world doesn't understand it so much. And so some theologies say, oh, well, David and Jonathan had an unnatural relationship, or in other words, that they were having a sexual relationship with one another, and that's why he was so head over heels. And I'm just going to say that sounds like an abomination according to this scripture, okay? There's nothing in that passage that says anything about them having an inappropriate relationship, and so that would have been something that someone would have constructed because of their own lack of ability to understand true loyalty and friendship. And so I want to just put that out there, because it's definitely out there. If you look close enough, people will say, oh yeah, they had a relationship and so it was fine because their souls were knit together. No, there's more than one way for a person to be knit together. And this one clearly by the scripture implies friendship, that they had a really deep friendship. And it's a test of our character, especially if that's the first place that we go. If a person has to have a romantic relationship in order to be loyal to someone, that's the only way that we can do that, then that's troubling. And that makes this application even more important for us. How strong is our character and our integrity to do the right thing, no matter the circumstances and no matter what we have to contend against? Because there's a place of loyalty where we say, well, I'll be loyal to my blood, I'll be loyal to my family, I'll be loyal to my future more than I'll be loyal to you. And that's a problem, right? If being loyal to your family, your future, your legacy is more important than doing what's right, we have a problem. And we need to definitely be focused on looking at God to make sure that our character is right. And we don't need to go extrapolating all these other meanings and other explanations for the relationship between Jonathan and David. We just know that Jonathan's character was stand up, because at this point the burden is on him, and he chooses to do what's right, even though it ends up making him lose the kingdom and lose his life. Well, this is something I encourage you to think about, because although we can turn it into another thing, we really should apply it to ourselves and think to ourselves, are we able to have that much of a stand-up character despite whatever else is going on? Well, I hope so. I hope we can do the right thing. I want you to know that I'm praying for you. I hope that you're praying for Launching Legacies and that you continue to do so. Remember, this week we're also dedicating ourselves to prayer for young people, so continue to do that as well. And we'll see you again tomorrow with another of our devotionals. Until then, be blessed.